Hello everybody, and thanks for joining me at FourEyedMonster Miniatures in my journey to unbox and review scale and non-scale pre-painted figures, as well as to document and showcase my scale model kit and miniature figure painting projects. What I have for you today is the second pop-up parade figure based on Frieren Beyond Journey's End, namely Fern, the human mage who accompanies Frieren as the latter's apprentice, with another character Stark, the human warrior, making up the main trio of adventurers in the anime series. Acquisition of this pre-painted version of Fern was one of those rare occasions in which not much thought was put into the purchase decision-making process, apart from the fact that the pop-up parade figure did not suck at first glance. My initial thoughts at that time were just to at least pair up both Frieren and Fern together on the display shelf, in a way that the duo did not look out of place next to each other. If I can help it, I will always try my best not to have just one sole character from an anime series or universe on display. Although of course there are instances I have not been successful doing this, for example in the case of 02 to name one. In Fern's case, it was a given that her figure came from the same lineup as Frieren, namely the pop-up parade standard size lineup from Good Smart Company, which made them highly compatible in terms of scale and style when on display. Anyway, we'll now transition to the channel's customary ASMR section, covering the unboxing of the pre-painted figure of Fern before commentary is resumed as per the timestamp provided. Two main characteristics of this pre-painted figure would have in all likelihood caused your average collector to completely disregard adding her to their collection. Fern is seen here adopting a fairly rigid standing pose that's compounded by modest concealing clothing covered entirely by flat neutral colors. But what it does get right though is the likeness factor, so that the figure looks exactly like Fern in her animated form. Moreover, the vivid purple hues on her hair and in her eyes have been given highlights and shadows, which help liven up an otherwise dull color scheme. This is the only hue on the figure with shading, as her skin tone and the hair brooch on the back looks pretty flat to me. While painting the brooch in metallic silver would have made it shinier and stand out, I understand why Good Smart Company didn't do it, so as to lower production costs on a part that wouldn't be visible in a forward-facing display anyway. Paintwork for this figure was extremely clean, which while welcomed, isn't much of a positive considering that large swaths of the figure is covered by fairly dull monotone hues, courtesy of Fern's long one-piece dress and large overcoat. The aforementioned dull flat hues have been to a certain extent countered by the vibrant purples in her eyes and hair. and also in a way by the glossy blacks of her boots, in that although black is as neutral as the off-white dress and black umber overcoat, at least the shiny glossiness of the boots contrasts greatly in terms of texture. On each of her feet, at the bottom of the boot, we can find two sturdy plastic pegs that should align easily with the four holes on the base. Speaking of which, comprises a small round off-white plastic piece that looks similar to the one Frieren had. Now that we have gotten a close-up look at the pop-up parade standard size figure of Fern, let's continue on with her assembly. I rarely bother with any commentary during the assembly phase, especially if the process is straightforward like what you see here. In this case, all you have to do is ensure that the pegs are aligned with the holes correctly before applying the necessary downwards pressure to slot the figure onto the base. But then during assembly, this happened. Fern's upper torso, dress and overcoat had easily detached from her legs. It turns out that the connection between her legs and upper torso were loose, to say the least. To be fair though, this lack of secure fitting or connection between the legs and upper torso is a fairly innocuous thing that is more of a mild irritant rather than any structural concern, because the figure is reasonably stable when displayed and it won't topple over or anything to that effect. On that note, let's now transition to the full 360-degree view. Being noticeably taller than the main character Frieren, the human mage Fern has a height of about 162 centimeters according to official height metrics. This translates in scale to a figure height of about 17.5 centimeters when measured from the bottom of her feet to the top of her head, which is roughly a full centimeter taller than the pop-up parade standard size figure of Frieren. As for Fern's pose, she has a static standing pose that's made somewhat slightly more dynamic and less rigid by her right hand angled outwards in an open palmed manner and her left hand reaching for her hair, which also contributes by flaring out behind her. These three simple sculpted forms help break the rigid straight-backed look that is unfortunately accentuated by the form-concealing attire comprising the long dress and overcoat. Now, modest concealing clothing in and of itself isn't a problem, because a certain level of dynamism can be introduced via strategic and creative posing of the figure. My issue with Fern's conservative scholarly attire was having the entirety of it covered by flat neutral hues. Although to be fair, the colors are based on the official color scheme. Having such large surface areas of a figure blanketed with flat neutral hues will naturally dampen the visual vitality of any pre-painted figure. Luckily for Fern, her official color scheme includes purple, which Good Smart Company makes good use of here by way of making the purple stand out more vividly through some highlights and shadows or tonal variations on her hair and eyes. While this effort does not effectively mask the overwhelming presence of neutral hues, it does mitigate it. At this close-up upper half view, tonal variations on the purple hues are certainly more obvious, thus better appreciated. But more important than that is how accurately the figure resembles her 2D anime self with regard to facial details. And as I've often mentioned ad nauseum, the high likeness factor of pop-up parade figures have been a key reason why this Good Smart Company figure lineup continues to be a regular go-to source for my collection, despite its mid-tier shortcomings, for example the boring poses of their figures. Up close, we can also confirm what we have noted earlier during the once-over, in that both the hair brooch and skin tone have flat colours and unpainted nails on her finger. On the mid to lower half view, we get a clearer picture on how the vivid purples of her hair, as well as the glossy blacks of her boots, to a certain extent, help break up the visual monotony of the flat neutral heels of her dress and overcoat. Fern, like Frieren, is stood atop a simple round base that I like because of its extremely small footprint. Unlike her mentor Frieren, which had a minor accessory in the form of a grimoire, Fern lacks even the luxury of that, as her dull aesthetics would have benefited from the mage staff that she is seen frequently with in the anime. Simply put, this is a pre-printed figure that would lack any appeal whatsoever for collectors who have never heard of the magical fantasy world of Frieren Beyond Journey's End. It's a collectible that lacks any generic characteristics that would serve as an indication of either sci-fi or fantasy origins. Such is its plainness. With that being the case, the appeal of this pop-up parade figure lies in its ability to endear itself to fans of the fantasy series. In this regard, I believe this mid-tier figure of Fern just about ticks all the right points, at least sufficiently so, for its affordable price point. For one, and most importantly, there is no denying that this is an extremely accurate 3D recreation of an immensely popular character from a highly rated anime TV series. And in part, the boring aesthetics is a direct consequence of the said accuracy, by way of Fern's scholarly form-concealing overcoat and dress, compounded by the tendency of figures from the pop-up parade series to adopt simple standing poses. But for fans of Frieren Beyond Journey's End, like me, this is an excellent figure of Fern, considering its lower mid-tier price point of about 4,800 yen at retail, and one that I obtained for my collection to pair up with the pop-up parade standard size version of Frieren without a moment's hesitation. As such, I'm giving this pre-painted figure of Fern a rating of Platinum or B rank. Bear in mind though, this favourable rating comes about solely through the rose-tinted lenses of a Frieren fan. So the caveat is that a non-fan may want to give this figure a miss altogether. Putting back my fan glasses again, I would like to add that Fern pairs very well with the Frieren figure from the same pop-up parade standard size lineup. I'll leave you now on that positive note. Thank you so much for joining me in this figure unboxing and review. Until we meet again, be well and be happy. Bye.